Good.
All right, we are good.
All set. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the applicants, board members, members of the staff, members of the public. This is the December 3rd, 2024 meeting of the City of Bangor's Planning Board. My name is Reese Perkins, Chairman of the board. Other board members in attendance this evening to my left are Vice Chair Ted Brush, Jonathan Boucher, Tricia Hayes, Janet Jonas, and alternate member Jennifer King. Member King is filling in for a vacant seat that we currently have and will be acting as a full member. Board members are volunteers from the Bangor community. City staff members in attendance this evening include Planning Officer Anya Collette, Development Director Ann Krieg, sitting down in the public section, Solicitor Dave Sebchuk, and Planning Assistant Sarah McGuillan. Thank you guys for all your help as well. The Planning Board has multiple roles. First, we serve for review of the amendments to the Land Development Code, which typically include either changes to the zoning districts or changes to text within the code. Our review of these amendments includes adherence to the comprehensive plan, as well as considering any applicable concerns from the staff. Our vote, concerns from the public, staff too, the public is what I meant to say. Our vote on these items is in the form of a recommendation to the City Council as to whether this item ought to pass or ought not to pass. The City Council makes the final decision on zoning and land development code changes. The first new business items on the agenda this evening fall into this category. Second, we serve as the regulatory authority for land development permits, commonly known as site plan review. This evening, we don't have any of those permit applications, so we won't be doing any of that. Information on the city's codes and standards, as well as the comprehensive plan, and lots of other information can be found on the city's website. We will call the applicants in the order that they appear on the agenda. When the applicant is asked to present their project or proposal, they or their representative should come forward to the podium, of course, unless you're on Zoom, and provide a brief description and introduction of their application. Once the presentation has been made, the applicant should stay at the podium while we consider any questions from the staff or from board members. At that time, the applicant may be seated and we will open the floor to public comments. If there are any comments from the public, we ask that the person that comes to the podium, or again on Zoom, introduces themselves and state where they are from and indicate if they are for or against the proposal. Either way, it is helpful if you present your thoughts based upon city code and or the comprehensive plan, as these are the primary documents used by the board to make our decisions. If you are on Zoom, please use the raised hand button and let us know you would like to speak, and then we will bring you into the meeting. All comments and discussion should remain respectful and considerate of all others. Once public comments are completed, we will close that item to public comment. The board will then deliberate on the proposal using the standards as applicable and act on the proposal. Once a project you are interested in has been reviewed, feel free to leave the meeting if you would like, but please be respectfully quiet so as not to disturb other agenda items. We thank all the applicants for taking the time to present their project for our review. This project is important for the city's development and the direction of our future. So I'll get right to the agenda. With all that said, we start with old business, and that would be, the first item would be meeting minutes from the November 19th, 2024 meeting. Do the applicants, do the board members have any comments, modifications? I have one. And actually, I was kind of glad, Sarah, that you're here for this. It may make it easier. The applicant stated when she bought, this is the Wiley Street project I'm speaking of. The applicant stated Member Boucher asked how many units, and she indicated that she bought what was considered legal 3-unit, but that it had 4 units. The minutes simply say, she said it was a 4-unit.
Got it.
I think it's important to say
Does make that distinction?
that distinction is in there.
Yep, I can do that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, could I have a motion on accepting the meeting minutes from November 19th, 2024 with that one change? Member Brush?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes as written with the change noted on the Wiley property.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member Boucher first. Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of the meeting minutes. The next item on the agenda is pre-approved building plans. I think our consultant is on Zoom to make that presentation. You're welcome to go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much.
Your audio.
We need to get you on speaker. I'm not sure if that's on your end or our end, but
Can you hear me now?
Because he's unmuted. So this would be this. Try the BTV one. This one? Down bottom. Oh. Can you try speaking now, Devin?
Hi, can you hear me
yeah,
now?
try.
Yes, we're
Yep.
good.
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm here to present some prototype plans that we've been developing with Anne, who is there at the meeting as well.
If you could, again, I didn't clearly get your name. Could you just
I'm sorry.
introduce yourself?
My name
Yeah.
is David Koff. I'm from GTD Architects in Scarborough, Maine.
Excellent. Thank
And
you.
we've been working with the city. We started developing these prototypes in the spring. We started looking at different neighborhoods in Bangor. The idea was that we would, they're now allowing for accessory dwelling units and trying to infill some lots that may be double lots or, so we looked at the tree streets and particularly Maple Street, the Little City, did just a survey of architectural styles throughout the city and developed prototypes that we hope will fit into the fabric of the city and reflect the architectural styles that are already there. I'm going to share my screen right now. Let's see.
Do you need me to do it? It might, you know what, I'll just do it. And then
Oh, okay. Nope.
There it is.
Oh.
Yeah, we've got it.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So we developed 6 prototypes of different makeups of units. The first among these was accessory dwelling unit. So the idea here is this would be a single studio style unit that you could build on a large lot where you had a little extra space. And this is a very efficient layout. We've done a similar sort of plan before and it's been very successful. So we've taken that idea, and our second option is to put a garage underneath, siting this at the end of a driveway, orientating it so it'll allow for that placement. Next, we developed a 3-unit building, and these multi-unit buildings are all 2-bedroom. So the idea with this one, we looked at the architectural styles on the tree streets, sort of bringing some of that scale, some of those details in with dormers, and we've created a stacked plan. So you'd have 3 similar units, with each with its own deck, allowing for full daylight throughout the unit. We also developed another 3-unit building The idea with this one would be, it would be an accessible first story and then 2 townhome style units above, giving the options for multi-story living in a apartment building. Next, this was our attempt to design a very efficient 4-unit building. Again, 2 bedrooms in each unit. Looking sort of at the Cape style that is prevalent throughout the city, and kind of matching that. And lastly, we developed this 4-bedroom unit. It's based on a very successful plan we used elsewhere, but we've modified the outside to give it sort of a row house feel with some variation. This allows for a lot of flexibility. Can add decks to these, have different options for layouts. And would probably fit in more of a undeveloped, less developed sort of situation. But we're hoping that these give a variety of options for somebody who would want to develop one of these. So with that, I would welcome your questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Staff comments before we get to board questions?
I don't know if Anne wanted to say anything or not.
Just quickly. Ann Krieg, Development Director. I just wanted to remind the board and the public watching that this project is part of staff's work to remove barriers to create housing by offering the ability for people to come in and, utilize these plans so that they don't have to pay a design professional to do it. They will have been reviewed by our code office to make sure they meet building codes, energy codes, life safety codes, so they can kind of get the permit and go. So that's what the purpose of this project is. Just wanted to remind people of that.
Thank you, Director Krieg. Board questions? Member Brush?
I've got a couple of questions. You mentioned that some of these designs have been highly successful. Would you elaborate on what is the criteria of success? How did that happen? And the other thing is, in your development, have you involved the consultation of builders in the area in the design?
We have not undertaken that exercise to involve builders. I would say the success of some of these is based on just happy clients and feedback from our clients that these plans have worked very well.
Your clients being builders or
Developers.
developers, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Jones, you had your hand up first, I
Yes,
think?
thank you.
Yep.
2 questions. Well, actually, an observation first of all. I think pre-approved plans are amazing. It's been really successful when I came where I was before. I lived in Bangor in Virginia, particularly in cities where they were trying to infill to create more housing opportunities. So I think this is a really positive step for us to take. But my second question is regarding accessibility, particularly with the ADU, because I noted that the ADU actually includes a step up to get into the house. So my question for staff would be, would accessibility modifications to the approved plans require additional review, or could they be incorporated initially at this point so we could just pre-approve them and let them go forward?
Question. Would you rather have the consultants speak on this, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Steve, do you want to answer that question?
I want to clarify, sorry, that step down is a typo. These would be fully accessible on the ground floor. Obviously, when there's units above, they would not be, but they would have full accessibility on all first floor.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Member King?
I'm thinking, I mirror your comment about these being pre-approved. That's a really amazing idea. I really hope this is something that goes forward within the city. I do have a question, having my code enforcement brain on. Here's back. Do they typically, the styles, will they have these pre-approved pre-approved building designs have like an estimated cost. Because when you have a building permit, it's based on cost. And it also would give a resident or a taxpayer, developer, more knowledge of an idea of what each of these would cost prior to going in and getting a building permit.
Director Krieg?
Thank you. The resident would still have to get a cost estimate to be able to determine what their fee's gonna be. But that would be up to the resident, because the costs will vary,
Definitely.
It could be one cost today and, 2 months from now, it could be something different, so.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. My only thought on this, when I saw some of the previous plans, was have accommodations. I mean, you said you're from Scarborough, so I assume these are used in the Northeast commonly?
Yes.
And
Yeah. these
so,
are-
yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. We've built similar units to these all throughout Maine. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can't tell from the drawings that we've seen what there would be for utilities or what there would be, say, for laundry or whatever like that. You must have some accommodations for that.
So we're still developing that. We're thinking probably currently heat pumps, heat pump water heaters. But we're still in discussions about how much flexibility we're going to allow for that.
Okay. And some input from the city on that?
We're still, Ann and I are still discussing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair.
Member Boucher, yep.
Can you, I can't tell from the pictures if these are on a slab or if these are on a foundation, or if it matters for the plan, one way or the other.
They're currently designed to be on slabs, which allows for accessibility.
Except for the garage one. I would
What's that?
assume.
You do garage on a slab, can't you?
Maybe.
Thanks.
Yeah, because the slabs.
For the public, I would, if there's gonna be future presentations, if we can select a few photos of sample houses, if that's appropriate, to say this is what inspired the design, and so this is why it fits in well to the neighborhood, that type of thing. I know sometimes in the past, there's been concern about development, that it will change the character with some modern buildings or different styles, and so I think that's gonna be a question that we might see from people, and it'd be good to just get ahead of it, just sort of, or maybe not, you're making a face, yeah, or just food for thought. All right.
Thank you. Any other board questions before we go to public comment? Seeing none, a few members of the public here. I don't see anyone on Zoom. Any comments? No? I suspect Jason's got some thoughts, but he's keeping them to himself.
What is the gentleman's name? Devin?
Can you
I thought it was Stephen.
Oh,
Is it Devin?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been calling him Stephen. I apologize, Stephen. I got your name
That's
wrong.
okay.
It's Devin.
just real quick. Hey, Devin, Jason Fish. How you doing?
Hey, Jason.
From a builder standpoint, do you have a material list that's put together, or that might be something for another time?
That we don't have a material list at this point.
Oh, okay. Just curious.
Thank you. Okay, yes, Counselor Fish.
Good evening. Carolyn Fish, Bangor resident and Bangor council member. Would you be providing any minor variations from your designs, such as perhaps a garage attached rather than under, or some minor variations of your designs?
That's not currently within our scope.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions on that, I'll close the public comment. There is no vote required on that. I'll give the board one last chance to ask Devin questions. If not, we will let him be free to go to dinner or whatever he might want to do. So we're going to move on, Devin. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, take care.
You too.
The next item on the agenda this evening is the adoption of findings and decisions for a couple of projects that we recently voted on and approved. The first one is 876 Stillwater Avenue. I would like a motion on that, unless anyone has any concerns or questions. 876 Stillwater, just to give you a reminder in case you're wondering where the address is, that's the Blue Seal Feeds project that we looked at. Member Bouchard?
I move that we adopt the findings and decision for 876 Stillwater Avenue.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Member Jonas, got there first. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of the findings and decisions for 876 Stillwater Avenue. The second project under adoption of findings and decision is 12 Carroll Street. That was the one, I think was 4 units, correct? 4 units. And I'd look for a motion on that one. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the findings and decisions on the 12 Carroll Street property made on November 19th, 2024.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that one? Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on 12 Carroll Street, findings and decisions. Thank you. Item D under our old items is an update on council vote on 12 Wiley Street. Not sure who's carrying. Do you want me to just intro?
If you want to, I watched the meeting, so either way.
Good for you. I was at the meeting. I don't always go to the councilors' meetings, but I was at that one. We were overturned by the city council. I'm fascinated to hear what you all think. I think, though, we can tie this into the other business item, which we have at the end of the meeting, which is thoughts on land development and land use planning, and save what would, if it's going to be a long conversation on the Wiley Street project, we delay these folks from getting to the projects that they're interested in this evening. So my suggestion would be, if anyone has quick comments on this, we can talk about it now. Otherwise, we can talk about this project more when we get to the other business at the end of the meeting. Good? Member Jonas?
Do you need a motion for that?
I probably ought to.
No, that you
Got a nod from the legal department, so I would ask for a motion to move further discussion on this item to the other business section of the meeting. Member Jonas?
Chair, I
thank
move
you.
that we continue discussion on the 12 Wiley Street property for later in the agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member King, thank you. I'm going to say hands, you're in favor? And that's unanimous. So that moves us on from the 12 Valley Street project. So we get to new business. And the first item of new business this evening is to amend the land development code by changing a parcel of land located at 34 Birch Street at map lot 055097 from Urban District 1 to Urban District 2. Said area of land contains approximately 0.14 acres total and is more particularly indicated on the map that you have attached and is part of your packet. The applicant slash owner of the project is Fish Holdings LLC. I would welcome Jason Fish, come on up and just make a quick presentation. We've got information in our packet. Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. You guys have the email that I sent it, okay. Thank you guys, appreciate it. Jason Fish, I'm the owner of Fish Holdings. Bought the property July or August. At that time, it was an operating 2-unit. There was occupants in the property. From my historical standpoint, when I reviewed it back, I think it was in 1946, Charlie Miller owned the property. He was a famous Maine guy. He brought a lot of celebrities here, did barbecues. He hosted them in the 2nd floor. So I think during that time is when it was created. When I look at the property, it was a tough situation when I bought it. It's a personal thing, but the family was going through a lot. They lost their child, so they were going through a lot. I bought it from them. It needed a lot of renovations, but it was being rented as a 2-unit. There was tenants in the downstairs and at the upstairs at the time. Penquist was actually renting at the time. We let them stay a little longer until we could get the guys lined up to do the work. And then it was that time when I came in and found out it wasn't a grandfather 2-unit. It was still technically a single family, even though it had been operating that way for a number of years. Why I think this should be an easy approval, I mean, I know nothing's easy, but we're surrounded by multifamilies. We're right next to, obviously, a mixed zone property that's right on State Street, that's right behind us. Our goal is to go in and do a full rehab, and when we ran into code and we actually had code visit the property, they agreed. I believe the square footage of the property, and if you look at the GIS map, you'll see that we're right in that district where there's a lot of, they're grandfathered, but they're all 2 units and 3 units that are right next to us. So we're not like plummeting a 2-unit right in the middle of a neighborhood that's all single family. So that's, our goal is to just go through the process, get it rezoned as a legal 2-unit. I think we meet the square footage requirements to do that. And that way we can get in there and rehab it and create two more units for the city and put long-term tenants in there. So that's our plan.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before you sit down, we'll just see if we have any questions for you from
Yeah,
staff
sure.
or the board. Staff comments?
I just want to mention the maps that were left at your seats. They were meant to be included in the packets. They're of the surrounding number of units according to tax data and then also the surrounding zoning. So just want to include that for information.
Thank you, Planning Officer Collette. Any questions on the maps?
I don't have a question, but a comment. They're very helpful. Thank you.
Board member questions of the applicant at this time? Member Jonas?
Just a quick one, and probably for staff. Mr. Fish mentioned email. Is that the attachments that we received that were the letter?
It should be. I don't think we received any other emails.
Yeah, it would be the correspondence, actually. Lindsay, my wife, sent it over, so it would be whatever that correspondence was in that.
So that's the letter with the
I
adjacent
believe
properties, identifying other area
Yes. Yep.
properties.
That were the same size and similar
Thank
to
you.
units, yeah.
That was in there. Thank you. No other questions for the applicant, I'll let Jason sit for now, and we'll kind of move forward with your application. Do I have any public comments? It's a small group here this evening, but I still want to make sure I hear from anybody who might want to speak. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comments. And further review or discussion by the board. And if none, which is fine, then I would look for a motion on this proposal. And a reminder that we typically go with the ought to pass, just for clarity's sake, whether you vote yes or no. Member Brush.
Mr. Chair, I move that the zone change for 34 Birch Street, map lot 55097, from urban residence 1 to urban residence 2 ought to pass.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member Jonas, thank you. And roll call vote. Member Boucher,
Yes.
Member Brush,
Yes.
Member Hayes,
Yes.
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Member King,
Yes.
and I hesitate to vote yes. I've mentioned previously my concerns. Nothing against your project, guys. It's more the process. I'm just not sure this is the right way we're doing this, but, we had the Wiley Street project, and I had some heartburn over that as well. So everyone knows, I kind of see this a bit as spot zoning. I see this not really in alignment with the comprehensive plan as staff sees it. There have been multiple conversations, and so we're working through all that. So I just want to note that. I will vote yes this evening nonetheless, in particular because there are a lot of properties around this property that are multiple family properties, even though many of them are like this situation and they're not really zoned properly, which is really what this is all about. So that is a motion of ought to pass to the city council. The city council will get this at their next meeting. I'm sure you're aware. If not, you've got someone you could ask next to you. And so that's the next step in the process. And otherwise, you guys are all set this evening.
I have one question.
Certainly, please come up though. Yep.
I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, or if someone here could answer this. So according that this all goes to plan next week and everything's done, we're waiting right now to get the project rolling.
going.
Can I get permits pulled, like, right after next, how long do I have to wait?
That would be a question for Playing Officer Collette.
I want to say 10 days. The ordinance changes take 10 days after approval, so
Okay, so there's nothing I can do in the meantime?
correct.
Okay, all right, I appreciate it, thank you.
And the ordinance doesn't change tonight.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
go back to council, but I'm just waiting, so once I get approval from council, it's a 10-day wait period.
Yes.
That's all I get. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next item, which is somewhat similar. And this item is to amend the land development code by changing a parcel of land located at 74 Allen Street at map lot 013024 from urban residence 1 to urban residence 2. Said area of land contains approximately 0.13 acres total and is more particularly indicated on the map attached and in your packet and made a part thereof. The applicant/owner is Zanza Realty LLC. Before the applicant comes up, I do want to bring up that member Jonas has a concern with conflict of interest, so I will let you speak first, just
Thank you.
say
I
what
just
that
want
is.
to bring up that I am a resident of this neighborhood, so close that my property is actually located on the map that was provided in your packet. So I do not feel that this is a conflict of interest for me, but I wanted to bring it to the board for consideration.
thank you. Would Solicitor Sevcek want to comment on this at all? You don't have to, but
You said you're close enough to be on the map.
Yes. I live at the corner of 14th and Allen.
it's like 5 properties away.
14th.
Four. There are 3
Oh, and
between
Allen.
mine and this.
Okay, so there's 2 properties in between yours and the
3.
subject?
3.
3? Okay. Are you across 14th Street?
Yes.
And would you say that you're being a resident in the area, would that allow you to be fair and impartial in how you would vote for this?
Absolutely. Just as I do for every other place in the city of Bangor.
Okay, thank you. I would look for other board member comments, and if not, I would look for a motion on the conflict of interest.
So we have to phrase the motion in the affirmative.
It's
Yeah,
easier
easier.
that way. Yep.
So-
Member Boucher?
I move that Member Jonas has a conflict of interest.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member Brush, thank you, and a roll call vote. Member Boucher,
No.
Member Brush,
No.
Member Hayes,
No.
Member King,
No.
and the chair votes no. So no conflict of interest is voted on, so Member Jonas can
Thank you.
remain a part of the review. So let's go to the applicant. If you would please come on up and make a presentation on the project. Again, we've got, what you've sent in, and what materials there are on the project, including maps and so forth. A brief summary would be great.
Hello. Hello, my name's Tom Colbath. I'm the owner of Zanza Realty LLC. I purchased a property at 74 Allen Street about a year ago from my neighbor. I actually live at 70 Allen Street, so hello, neighbor.
Hello.
And with the idea that I would turn it into a first floor apartment and a second floor apartment for my 5 kids that are aging and ready to move out. Being a resident of Levant my entire life before I moved to Bangor about 9 years ago, the rules and regulations out there were a little bit luxe to, let's say that at least, so I thought I could just so when I went to get the building permit, thinking that I could do both apartments is when when I was told I couldn't and I had to go this route instead. So I've finished the first floor apartment. I did that last year. I applied for a permit and finished that and got my occupancy permit. So now I'm just going through the process to add a second floor apartment in this building now. Currently, the second floor is unoccupied, closed off, heated but closed off. And so I'm just looking to put a second floor apartment at this building.
Thank you. If you could stay on up while we hear from any comments from the staff. None. Any board member questions for the applicant?
It's one.
Member
it's-
Boucher, yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you, Chair. It's a house that you're converting to?
It was a single family house, yes.
Okay, so it's not like it can be considered a house with an attached ADU, accessory dwelling unit, in this case?
No, I kind of went through that, if I can answer. I kind of went through that with my building permits and the way the flooring is set up, the size of the house. Because you have to have like 75%, right, one size or
I see.
the square footage wise. I couldn't make it work without making one unit like a 3-bedroom with a bedroom down on the first floor and that sort of thing. So that's why I went this route instead. It just wouldn't break it up so that if you had 2 people living there, it wouldn't be adequate spacing. So the first floor is a 1-bedroom unit. The second floor would be a 2-bedroom unit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other board member questions for the applicant? I would ask, if nobody else has any, what's the situation with parking?
Parking, there's, you can park 4 cars total in the driveway, 2 on each side and back out. And there was a massive, I don't know how long you've lived there, but there was a massive silver maple there that was there for ages, and it was unfortunately dying to the point where the owner previous to me had to cut down. But that enables me to widen the driveway now that silver maple's not there. So sad, because it was a beautiful, beautiful tree, but it was landing on my roof every
It
winter.
wouldn't have been beautiful.
No.
Thank you. I'm gonna let you sit down, I think, at this point, and we'll kind of keep moving on here with this. So let's see if we have any comments from the public. Just a quick look on Zoom. I see no hands raised, nobody in the room, so I'm gonna close the public comment period. Any further discussion, review, or comments from Member King?
I just have a question for Anya, Planning Officer Anya. Were there any abutters that may have come in to discuss concerns or have any questions about there being a multi-unit in their single-family unit home areas?
No, We just got a question from somebody, but I think that was for 34 Birch Street. I don't think anybody had anything for 74 Allen. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member comments, thoughts? Member Brush?
I would observe that, this is the map is very telling on this one. It's quite a homogeneous neighborhood with single family. Yes, there are a few multifamily units in the block, but only a couple. Predominantly, it's single family.
Thank you.
Chair?
Member Jonas?
I would observe anecdotally, as a member of the neighborhood, that there are multifamily units within the URD that are not necessarily zoned properly.
How about, excuse me.
Yeah, if I may, I think this sort of renders back to what we talked about at our last meeting, in that we have a map, and herein lies a bit of a problem. We have a zoning map, you all have, which is the yellow map. We have, I like to think of as the pink and purple map that Planning Officer Collette has now provided us with, which gives us the tax map information, which is more enlightening than the zone map, in that I think it shows what folks are admitting through at least the tax appraisal process that are multi-units. But that still doesn't always account for some of these other properties, I think is what Member Jonas is saying. Is that right?
Yes.
That there are other properties there that might be multifamily that are not even shown on the tax map as being multifamily. Fair, recognizing that, which again sort of renders back to the the concerns that I have. With, we don't really know what we're looking at. Councilor Fish mentioned it at the council meeting last week, that her experience was 30 years, I think you said, of this sort of troubling situation, and I remember.
Very generous.
Yeah, whatever it was.
42.
Okay. I've said it before with my building inspection experience, I'd get called to a 1 unit, there was a 3 unit, or a 2 unit, there was a 4 unit, or whatever. And so it's very common. That doesn't really get us anywhere though. So unless there are any other comments, I would look for a motion on this project. These are not easy to decide. Obviously, we voted on one last meeting, no, and the council overturned us. So we're fighting a bit of a battle here. But anyway, we need a motion, and it should be worded in the form of ought to pass, whether you plan on voting for it or against it.
Chair, could I have the floor for a moment?
Yes, Solicitor Subject.
It sounds like the issue of spot zoning is being thought about during your deliberations. And there was some law on spot zoning that was kind of shared with you by, was it?
Officer Collette, correct.
Officer Collette. And that law was kind of general, and I wanted to look at any state of Maine cases to try to help guide in that regard. And there's a case, City of Old Town versus Demollis. It's a 2002 Supreme Judicial Court of Maine case. And I just wanted to read for you a passage from that Supreme Court case. The facts aren't really relevant, but the court's wording I thought might be helpful in terms of guiding a little bit. The court said, spot zoning is not itself a pejorative term, and the mere fact that an ordinance benefits a particular piece of land will not render it illegal. Illegal spot zoning is the process of singling out a small parcel of land for a use classification totally different from that of the surrounding area for the benefit of the owner of such property and to the detriment of other owners. And then they go on to say, in order to constitute illegal spot zoning, the ordinance, 1, must pertain to a single parcel or a limited area, ordinarily for the benefit of a particular property owner or especially interested party, and 2, must be inconsistent with the city's comprehensive plan. So it doesn't sound like there had been any inquiry as to whether, if you're considering the issue of whether this is illegal spot zoning, I didn't hear any inquiry as to whether it was inconsistent with the city's comprehensive plan or not. Because if that's not the case, then a vote down based on spot zoning could be vulnerable to overturning in the courts. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good stuff. I think some of that we may have also reviewed previously with Assistant Solicitor Innes when we spoke with her, which was, I had a meeting with Planning Officer Collette and Assistant Solicitor Innes back, I don't know, 2-3 months ago. In that regard, I think she spoke of that case as well. And some of what Solicitor Sobczak is referring to, we have discussed previously. I brought up the comprehensive plan issue last meeting, as you might recall. So we have discussed some of this before, but we haven't discussed it tonight. Would you all like me to just kind of say again what I said last time, just for helpfulness? I don't know.
Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing. Each claim of spot zoning should be considered based on its own factual scenario. So what I'm saying is that with respect to this
This is
one
different
particular
than the
piece
one.
of property, I would suggest that there be some inquiry about whether or not it's consistent or not consistent with the comprehensive plan, with respect to this particular piece of property. And you've already looked at the surrounding area and whether or not it's consistent or inconsistent with the other zones and uses in the area. But I didn't hear anything about the comprehensive plan, so.
Thank you. So I'll just go ahead. You all can kind of beat me up or cheer me on or debate me if you'd like on this. But as I spoke last time, the comprehensive plan that we have clearly states that one of the biggest goals of the city is more housing. I think you all know that. You were a part of it for the most part. And it spells out many things that it suggests we should do related to adjusting zoning for the benefit of housing, including listing accessory dwelling units, which we did, including adjustments to our code based upon LD 2003 state law, including encouraging tiny homes and manufactured homes. And we've done all those things. It never says we should look at single properties and change their zoning simply for the benefit of housing. So this is where I separate myself from staff, because when staff provides the council and the board the ordinance change, I don't know how much you guys look at it, but they often say in there, whereas, and then that's followed by a bunch of words. And in this case, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something to the extent of whereas in the urban zone, and you remember what the urban zone is, right? The urban zone is mostly where we have our utilities. And whereas the urban zone consists to some extent, I can't remember the exact wording, of medium to high density residential and historic districts, I think it says on top of that, that it is in alignment with the comprehensive plan. My struggle with that is that's like saying, in my mind, it's like saying everything inside the urban zone is multifamily. And it's not, and I don't think we want it to be. And so there is, for us as a board, there is no line to draw where we say it's okay to have just URD1 and where it's better to have multifamily. And so when I've spoken to this in the past, one of the things I have brought up is in the comprehensive plan, it suggests strongly, and I can't remember the wording, that we look at the 2018, which is sometimes referred to as the 2019 housing report, which, gosh, is 6 years old at this point. But we have never really used that housing report, I don't believe, to the great extent that we could have. We paid for that housing report, and yet we haven't really implemented it. One of the things it says in that housing report is we should consider in neighborhoods, and it calls them villages, and that we should let the folks in those villages, and I like to use Fairmont as an example because I think Fairmont is a good example. It's got areas like around the park and so forth that are clearly single-family home areas, and I don't think you would want to have multifamily homes in that area. But yet over towards West Street and the other end down towards Webster, you have a lot of multifamily homes. And so you take an area like Fairmont and you get a bunch of citizens from that area together. This is not my idea. This is a 2018 suggestion of the housing report. And have them decide which portions of that area, that village of Fairmont, is going to be multifamily and which portion is going to be single family. And of course, not everyone's going to agree, but you get everyone to kind of come together and come up with a solution, and that's what you then allow. And you do that in the tree streets, and you do it in, the Thomas Hill area, and you do it everywhere to sort of take care of this issue. I think that was never considered. I don't think it ever happened. I think in part the COVID pandemic sort of got in the way maybe of some of that. But that's my idea of how this should be solved. So you all over there that are listening to me gas on about this, really my view of how we do this, and by the way, I've also mentioned Portland. What Portland did is they got rid of single-family zoning altogether. Portland just wiped out single-family. URD1 is gone down there. They don't use it as URD1, they call it something else. But that's another way to do this. I'm just not a fan of doing it one, and I don't think our comprehensive plan suggests we should do it one property at a time. I think we should do it either as a neighborhood or we should do it as, the entire urban zone. But just doing it one property at a time is getting back to the legal issue, because it's not just an issue of the comprehensive plan, but one of the things that the courts have also stated is the fairness issue. And is it fair to the neighbors around that property? And you have one owner, no offense to you all that are trying to create more housing, but you have one owner of a property who is receiving a profit from rented units, whereas possibly on either side or on all sides are single-family homes that they don't. And that seems like an unfairness to me. And so those are my thoughts, and I sort of mentioned most of those at last meeting, maybe not in the same kind of overall way, but that's my thoughts on that.
Chair, can I make some points?
Yes, absolutely, you did last time too, yeah.
Yeah, so just want to talk about first, want to clarify that technically we don't actually have single-family zoning anymore since LD 2003. You can have up to 3 to 4 units on a property depending on the lot size. So there is that. But also, some planning practice is starting to get away from considering single-family, multifamily different uses and just considering, and I don't even want to say density because there can be issues with that too, but there can be high-density single-family and low-density single-family, and there can be, I want to say lower density multifamily, like I would consider 2-unit, maybe lower density versus a high density, 20 to 40 unit apartment building. So you can have different densities and it doesn't necessarily correlate with whether it's single family or multifamily. And in the comp plan, the comprehensive plan doesn't typically get as specific as delineating where specific zone changes are going to be. You want it to be vague because we get into the specificity now, first as we're going through the land use plan implementation and the land use code update. This is where we determine how we want to implement the comprehensive plan and what it says and how we want to interpret it. But not only that, when you consider zone changes, that's also where you consider the interpretation of the comprehensive plan. The zoning period is the implementation of the comprehensive plan. So whether you're considering zoning changes on a case-by-case basis, or you're considering the entire rezoning as part of this larger process, all of it is implementing the comprehensive plan. So your purpose, your role is to provide that interpretation. The comprehensive plan, again, it was vague, a little vague on purpose. And also, want to go back to the housing report item. The housing report came out just before we started, or we're going to start the whole comprehensive plan process. A widespread zone change like that would really be something we want to tackle through what we're doing now with implementing the comprehensive plan. And also just want to point out too that in addition to, whether it aligns with the comprehensive plan and whether it's equitable to the surrounding neighbors, you also want to look at the public benefit to the community as a whole. That's also been drawn out in case law when you're looking at zone changes. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Member King.
I just wanted to ask if the intention at all, when the comprehensive plan was adopted, to eventually go about a zone, like a citywide zone change to decide for the purpose of additional housing, if that was something that was down the road going to be implemented.
Yeah, definitely. That's the intent, is that as soon as you're done with the comprehensive plan, you do align your zoning and your ordinances with the comprehensive plan. But there's always like a limbo period, because as you know, this is going to take 2 years. There's going to be a limbo period where people are going to apply for zone changes. And I think, as Ann had pointed out, I think a year or two ago in meetings, because we keep getting these types of zone changes a lot, it's an indication that the zoning isn't really working. And that's, part of what was attempted to be addressed in the comprehensive plan was to provide a guide that would help make the zoning work. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
On your 3 points, I think you made?
I think, yeah, 3 or 4.
The first and the third, I kind of have to agree with, but the second, which was the intent of the comprehensive plan, I still find it troubling. The only time I recall, we were, most of us, but not all of us, were here for the development of the comprehensive plan. We talked about ADUs, we talked about manufactured homes, we talked about tiny homes. Yet we see these, as you mentioned, we see these very frequently, and we've seen them frequently, actually, I think for most of the time I've been on the planning board, which I think is about 3 years at this point. And we never really talked about it, with the exception of when we talked about LD 2003, we hoped that would help, but it hasn't. It really hasn't. We still have these changes, and I think it's because of the size of many of these lots just prevent LD 2003 from solving the problem as, the latest applicant suggested. And so, I guess, and the other thing I would say is that I'm not sure really, I mean, I guess you could argue that the benefit to all that this project does is it creates an additional housing unit in Bangor, which I think is the ultimate goal of, as I said in the beginning, the comprehensive plan, or at least one of the ultimate goals. So I'm not entirely convinced, but I get Planning Officer Colette's points.
I just wanted to say one more thing too on the housing report. Anne actually did a ton of work on that and put together a spreadsheet previously on how much had been implemented. I think there were maybe a few things left on there, but I just wanted to give her credit for that work. So.
See what you started, Dave?
I have to say, I don't think that LD 2003 has eliminated single-family housing. I know that you have to
Right.
allow certain ADUs and certain units, but it did not take away a city's ability to zone single-family and have stuff like lot size requirements. They stay in place, they aren't overturned. So
I think they actually answered that in one of those questions that they had, and frequently asked questions, whatever it was. But anyway, thank you, Dave. Member Jonas, you had a question.
I have actually 3 questions.
Carry on.
That's okay. One for Planning Officer Colette. Is this proposed change in alignment with the comprehensive plan?
That's for you to determine, so you all should have a discussion on that.
Okay, so that discussion's ongoing. Second, for the applicant, was this property previously unoccupied, vacant?
No. And if you would, just come on up. to
I'm
the
sorry,
podium,
I
please.
apologize. Making it up.
The previous owner, Richard Bean, actually owned the property for, I believe, about 35 years. So
And that person still lives in the unit?
he does not live there anymore. He actually lives on my property in Levant. So I
So
sold
it's
some
currently
property out
vacant.
there and I bought the property off him.
So it's currently vacant?
So the unit on the bottom floor is completed and it's rented. I had a year lease signed last year and she's currently in there
Okay.
now
Okay,
on the first floor.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
My third question is for the board itself. How is this different than all of the other zone changes we've done since I came on the board at the beginning of the year, changing from URD1 to URD2? Because we've passed a lot of them.
I will mention that I mostly voted no on all of them. And been fairly singular in that, unless it was something that, as we talked about with the first applicant, where it was fairly clear that there's a lot of other similar properties surrounding that one. But I think if you look at my voting in the past, it's been, for the last couple of years anyway, it's been, I felt a little lonely because it's been a 6-1 vote many, many times.
So as Solicitor Sobchak noted too, we do want to consider it on a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
Thank you.
you're required to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's the law. Member Boucher?
So I
first?
was gonna say, and I in the past, although you just said don't consider, one of the tools I bring to these, and I have voted yes on these in the past, and based off of the information that's been presented, I do plan to vote yes this time as well. One of the items that I think about is that there could be an accessory dwelling unit, and there would be 2 units on this, and that wouldn't, and I don't see that as fundamentally changing the character of the neighborhood. And based on the lot size, the maximum number of units that could be on this, even as a URD2, would still only be 2 units. So it wouldn't fundamentally change what could happen. He was mentioning, the applicant was mentioning earlier, that if you just put a wall up halfway through the second floor, it would qualify as an ADU. And that's the type of limiting factor that I think we should, that I think makes a strong case that this wouldn't be a fundamental change that, so if it was a 1-bedroom and a 3-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom, we'd still have the same number of occupants presumably, and we were okay with one version of that, but not okay with the other version of it, which, so that's that's where I can come at it and see that this is okay. I do think that we are in a sort of limbo phase while we're reviewing our zoning for a future zoning revamp that's coming, and we've had a presentation about that already once. And that puts us in a challenging spot where we are seeing a lot of these questions coming up. I do think this differs, and again, we're not being asked not to talk about previous cases. I do think if this was an like a MNSD type of request, or where we would be talking about putting up a condo building, like that was a couple stories high, then I think that would be pretty different. And I think that's the type of spot zoning where I would be able to say, oh, that's clearly out of character for the neighborhood, and we wouldn't want to suggest that for the people abutting or the people in the neighborhood. That's sort of the reasoning I bring to it. I think those were the points I was trying to mentally list while you guys were discussing. I really appreciate what you've been discussing back and forth, and I found it very enlightening when you were saying, Anya, so thank you so much for that.
Member King?
I agree with everything you've said, Member Boucher. I do also want to put out there that it's a requirement for abutters to be notified for any type of zone application, zone change application. And we really should take that into consideration. And if there is nobody speaking against this within the neighborhood, we should also, take that as something where part of the case by case. I mean, if there was somebody that may have raised questions about it, we would have that information in front of us. So I just wanted to make sure that we leave that known.
One other point I was gonna make, so I hinted at it, but in the different use applications between URD 1 and URD 2, so one of the items that we think about is what's the future, 30 years down the road, could this lot be used for something that would then be out of character because of what we decided today by putting it into URD 2? And I don't see the use cases for URD 2 to be out of keeping for this, because it's not along a main thoroughfare. And so we're not talking about I can't think of the term for it, but it's the shared housing. I can't think of it.
Co-living dormitory.
The co-living housing. So that's the other reason why I'm not particularly concerned with this this request. I hope I explained that.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Staff? Good discussion. Motion? Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move that the city council ought to accept its zone change on 34 Beach Street map, lot 55. I'm sorry, I got the wrong one. Wrong page. I'll start over again. I move that the city council ought to adopt the zone change for 74 Allen Street map lot 13-24 from urban residence 1 to urban residence district 2.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes no. Your project, 2, 3, 4, 5, is approved by a vote of 5 to 1. The next step, as you probably heard earlier, is this goes to the city council at their next meeting, and you can go from there. Thank you. All right, so we are going to go on to other business, and kind of brings us right back around to what we were just talking about, which may be a good way to close up. And maybe we've talked this out entirely before. I'm not sure, but I suspect staff may have some thoughts on this. One of the other things I would like to, I guess there's two things I would like to bring to your attention. The first, I'll go back to the Wiley Street project, because I thought, if you haven't watched the video, I'd encourage you to watch the review of that video. It is, I think, worth kind of learning a little bit about the council's thinking with regard to the Wiley Street project. But if I may just repeat councilor's comments. One said if the planning division says it's in alignment with the comprehensive plan, then we can't go against it. One said the applicant did what they were supposed to do. This is not their fault. They shouldn't be punished for it. One said this is a common problem and they're just trying to do things right. There is no one here trying to take advantage. Another said we can't kick people out on the street. Another said we have to make it clear we want to allow developers to come in here and invest in the city. And lastly, someone said we need housing, which I think is pretty clear to all of us. I think those were poignant. Clearly don't agree with them all, but they were poignant comments. And that brings me to my, what I will say as far as at least my beginning thoughts on the land development code and land use plan. And what I didn't say with regard to these other projects previously is that I feel like the real source for a lot of these comes down to a process problem where, like with Wiley Street, what happened, the applicant, as I brought up earlier, she stated that she knew it was a legal 3-unit, even though it was a 4-unit when she bought it, and yet she bought it. What would have been, I think, the right thing for her to do is to inquire with your office, really, at that moment, and find out what does that mean and what's the effect of that, and do I need to do something before I purchase this, or am I possibly in a situation where I've got a 3-unit that's a 4-unit disguised as a 3-unit that it has to go back to a 3-unit, which is what almost happened. And so I feel like some of the applicants that were here this evening kind of did it the same way. Like the second applicant seems to have decided he was going to make apartments first, bought this property, started the process, and then realized he needed zone changing and came to us at a longer down the road point in the process where it couldn't be fixed as easy. And I'm not sure in the big picture of how we teach people to do it the right way, but I feel that if we could get to folks that are trying to make more housing and let them know earlier in the process, if you have a zoning problem, it should be fixed before you get started on the project. It would solve a lot of this that we find ourselves kind of up against. And member Hayes, you've been quiet all night and you got your hand up, so I'm gonna say you can speak next.
Just taking it on. It seems to me that if people are working with a realtor to buy a property, that some of that would land on the realtor to educate them under what they're purchasing.
Correct, and I believe that's true, that should be that way. I'm not sure it happens in real life that way a lot of times. And I will say that I went back and I don't think there's anything wrong with me doing this because it was after the vote. But I went back and looked at the Wiley Street property. That was advertised as a 3-unit. I mean, that was, the realtors involved in that knew it was a 3-unit.
Or it was a 4-unit, but they called it a 3-unit.
Right, but it
when
was
you looked at
listed
it, didn't you?
online. You can see the listing now. You can go online now and still see the listing from last April. It only sold last April. It was listed as a 3-unit.
Can we pause just real quick? Dave, is it okay for them to be discussing this in this detail?
I think that the vote's over with.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
And it's beyond us anyway, because the council's already overturned us, so yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all right.
Okay.
I think it serves as an example because there's different points in a typical housing sale where it should be caught, like when it goes to be appraised, if it doesn't match the zoning. But again, they may not have gone inside to appraise it and then to find that it was a 4-unit actually, and that it would have been outside of the U or D 2, it might have been, I forget now. But I was gonna propose, and this is for whatever it's worth, that at the point of closing, that there was some sort of memorandum that was provided to home buyers in Bangor stating, this is the zone of the building that you just bought in, these are the available uses. That's what you can do, and if you plan on doing something different, then you should know that going into this purchase,
Yeah, I think
We're not really involved.
that would, it would either require
Should
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
I
no,
mean-
I'm not saying I can do that. I'm saying, I'm just food for thought, like, that would be, you know, for our planning staff and our solicitor and our, you know, city
I mean, I
staff,
just
that
don't
that
know.
might
But
be.
people don't come and ask about it.
No,
They just do it.
And the tax cards are public record.
but they're not always accurate either.
Well, no, agree, but in the last couple of cases, because I've been looking, they have been extremely accurate.
Great.
They've been as presented before we made the zone change. And
I have been through the process of purchasing real estate where the assessment was rejected because the number of units didn't comply with the zoning. And so I know that the process works if they have the information in front of them. But that is an unfortunate situation. I stand by our decision because MSD, it was such a different zone, and 30 years down the line, that could be a very different building. And I also do think it is sort of out of keeping to have that many units, although I'm not really opposed to that either. It still goes into this overall tricky situation where our zoning seems to be not necessarily aligned with our comprehensive plan initiatives of trying to, although it's a tricky balance of trying to encourage more housing but can maintain neighborhood identity and continuity. This is the word I want. Contiguous, something like that.
So, one of the questions I want to ask is, what do you all see for the zoning in the urban neighborhoods? I mean, do you see changes? Like, what do you see happening? Like, what do you think should happen? Do you think different areas in the urban neighborhood should be treated differently? What are your thoughts on that? Because it's possible to, focus on making things much denser, kind of in like a radius outside of downtown, and then it gets maybe lower density as you go out. And maybe, places like the area around the golf course does stay as it is, but as you get further in, maybe like towards Hammond or, what have you, you can get a little denser, just make it more of a transition.
Same as like the tree streets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a mixed bag on all three blocks. I mean, there's very few, once the closer you get down to Stillwater Avenue, there's just a few multi-units throughout, but the majority of those blocks are mixed. Like they're URD1 zoned, but they're mixed.
And where is that?
Pearl, fruit, birch,
Oh, yeah,
fern.
Tree Streets, yeah. that
Maple.
area. Yeah. Yes, member.
so one of the reasons I asked the question of the last applicant about vacancy is because there's a property adjacent to me that's vacant. And that's the thing that I really don't like to see in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
I don't like to see vacant properties that are deteriorating because nobody's living in them. And so it's important to me to see that something happens with these properties. And if turning it into a multifamily unit will save this large property from being derelict in my neighborhood, I think that's important.
I think that
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that having the unit number being determined by the lot size, and I think that gets us really close to it. I don't love the idea of saying these neighborhoods get to be sort of protected and posh, and these other neighborhoods can just be different. But I understand that we live in a diverse city where there's those pressures that are there. You were talking about like around the golf course, making sure that those stay single family, but everywhere else is fair game. And I don't love the way that sounds. And so I think lot size creates a certain structure, and then historical, of course, creates additional barriers to that. And I think that's how it can be protected.
Yeah, I didn't mean keeping them a single family, because like currently, if they have the lot size, they can have 4 units. So I'm just saying it would stay like that. And then the lot size requirement would be smaller the further you get in towards downtown.
I see what you mean. So you'd be able to build fewer lots, units out on like a big many acres out in Outer Hammond or something like
Yeah.
that, versus if you were downtown. Yeah, no, I think that is in keeping with what, you know, the plan with the high density and low density. I think that makes sense, of course.
I will note, you know, because I went to a planning conference recently, and one thing that some towns are starting to do is get rid of density limits if the footprint of the building is not changing. So if they're just cutting the building up into units, because if you think about it, even if you have a big single-family home and you have a bunch of bedrooms, you could have a bunch of people in there. You know, same as if you have, and maybe actually you would have fewer people, maybe if you had more one-bedroom apartments in a building. So different towns are doing things like that. So just food for thought, if that's something you want to consider.
I would say, and I'm not sure how to solve this problem, but in the neighborhood I am at, it's a fairly mixed neighborhood. There's single family, it's an older area, so there's a lot of non-conforming properties. And many of them are multi-units, ours is, and some of them are multiple units, 4 or 5 units, whatever. There is one sober living house, and which is similar to Wiley actually, which isn't actually all that far from me either, Wiley Street. And I had a neighbor say to me, they don't mind having those kinds of properties, but they wouldn't want it to be too much more of them. And I don't know how you prevent that, but right now it's a nice mix. We have a nice mix of a variety of housing types. And
Do you mean they said they didn't want more sober houses or they didn't want more multifamilies?
well, there was a proposal actually on one of the houses to make it into a multifamily, and they didn't feel like that was right because it was just too much. And I can see that. I don't know how you control that. But a certain amount, everyone's okay with a certain amount of development and additional units. A single unit going to a 2-unit doesn't have a lot of parking problems. But if you have, like the area on Wiley Street, one end of Wiley Street is mostly single family. On the other end, where we, reviewed that project last meeting, that's more multi-units. I don't know if you guys caught it last meeting, but when we asked her about parking, she talked about Wiley Street. There's no parking on her property. The parking is on Wiley Street. And so that affects the neighbors when you have 2 or 3, when you have multiple multifamily, all of a sudden now you get parking problems that are affecting everyone in the neighborhood, not just, people right in front of the house. So things start getting difficult for the neighbors.
So I do want to, because we had a discussion about reducing parking minimums before, kind of muddling different subjects here a little bit. Having parking on the site, increases their impervious on their lot, but also reduces the space they can have for housing. So the best practices in other communities are to push parking on the street so they don't have to provide that parking on the site. And granted, Wiley Street's a pretty small street, but having parking on the street can also calm traffic. So it can help, on other streets, like, for example, 14th, just throwing that out
Well,
there.
Allen Street's a good example of that because it's so narrow.
Yeah,
If there are cars on both sides, it's a one-way street. It's a single lane.
Yeah.
So that's a really good, and that was a great question when you asked it.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to mention Webster's like that too. Webster, we've seen that same problem. Where you get enough parking on Webster, so that you can't pass another car as they come down.
well, and I think that would come down to whether we need to put signs, is it one side of the street only for parking, no street parking if it's way too narrow. But Public Works actually is trialing this winter, allowing on-street parking all winter. Because we are having these conversations, like, looking at, do we further reduce parking minimums? That's something the consultants are looking at with the land use code, land development code. So it's a conversation worth having if you want to.
Jim,
Yes, Member Jonas.
I think, I'm sorry, I spoke out of turn last
It's,
time.
no, it's
but-
okay. It's kind of an open discussion at this point.
Well, so one of the challenges that I often ask developers when they talk about their parking plans is why there's so much parking after, particularly the unit on Stillwater, when they decided that they wanted to go with much higher ratio of parking than was required, because I really don't like having all that impervious surface, particularly in the Pinchot district. So yeah, but then, but single-family housing or multifamily housing or just on Allen Street in my neighborhood, parking on the street is a very different thing than creating parking lots. Agreed. But again, it's already paved, the streets are already paved, so it's a really interesting question, because what we are kind of forcing ourselves into is a one solution for every application, as opposed to you're in a residential neighborhood versus your, forgive me, Stillwater Avenue, where parking lots are much more common, not necessarily
It's true.
as desired, but much more common. So it's a weird dichotomy of, how can we create one code to meet all of the things? And I guess that's one of the reasons why we have different districts, and different zoning, is to be able to do that, but
Yeah, and the thought too is that not requiring the off-street parking for especially these urban neighborhoods. I mean, it is a dense area, it is walkable and bikeable somewhat. And what some other places are doing are, when they do reduce or eliminate parking requirements, they require bike parking to help encourage that. And the thought is just that if you eliminate these parking requirements, it will hopefully encourage people to bike and walk. And maybe they already do. We've heard from developers that some of their clients don't have cars, or maybe they only have one car. And like you'll see a lot too is developers going to one bedroom, apartments, and there might only be one person living there. So they don't need all that parking. That's what we're finding. And I can't remember what else I was gonna say, but those are just some of the background things behind the off-street parking.
well, and one more comment.
Member Jonas, yeah.
In a lot of ways, parking becomes a market driver, or it's market driven, right? The need for parking is market driven. If you really want to have parking, you find a place that provides the parking. And that's a little bit elitist, because, that assumes that folks that need parking can afford it, but it is a market driver. Just as being on a transit line is a market driver.
Any other thoughts on
Yeah, that's the question,
zoning?
right?
Oh,
Zoning, land development?
we're talking about how could you control the density of the sober living centers or things like that. And I'm not necessarily proposing that, but you could say within a radius, that there's just that certain areas don't become an epicenter for those type of services. Although there's even a case to be made that maybe having some consolidation would add coordination or potential opportunities for services to get coordinated in that way. But if you were talking about how would you control it in that situation with your neighbor who was mentioning, this is the right amount of density right now, and then no more after this type of.
I think when it comes to sober living, we would have to look at state law.
Oh, I agree.
But I
It
do,
sounds ridiculous.
yeah, I do think in other places, because I read a planning study on that recently, and some places have put separation requirements, and it can actually be beneficial. It's actually been shown to be not good, not advantageous to have them lumped together. It's best if they're in a single family, don't want to say single family, but like typical neighborhood, typical residential neighborhood, and not all lumped together. So maybe like one per block or something like that, so.
You know, I agree with that. My experience is that an integrated neighborhood of all socioeconomic types is much healthier for a community. My experience bears that out.
We are gonna be talking about this more regularly, is that right?
Yeah, we'll put it at the end of every agenda, so.
The idea being is that we kind of stir up these sorts of discussions as much as time allows and have more of this, forward thinking. Did you get what you were hoping for as far as questions answered and whatnot?
Yeah, I think it's been very helpful.
Okay.
So.
Everyone good with that? We'll move, I mean, I don't have anything else on the agenda except for, does anyone else have any other comments or questions on Member Hayes?
Not on this, but
Yeah.
can we get an update on Roma Joe's? That seems to have just fallen off.
We do not have an update. When we do have an update, it will be an executive session. It will be pending litigation or at least contemplated litigation. So we don't want to talk about that in executive session. But I don't have anything else for you now compared to the last meeting, so.
Yeah.
We will do that when we have more information.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are two of the decision notices on the table for you.
Oh, yeah, we
both
have
signed, so.
we have to sign decision notices. I have a green bag over there with some pear juice if anyone's interested.
Pear juice.
And I believe we have hit the end of our meeting this evening, and thank you for all your thoughts and comments, and the meeting is adjourned.